Hello guys, today for the 6th, 17th of May in Norwegian history, I'm out here in the forest and I'm looking for a great historical Norwegian artifact. Oh, there it is! So this medieval looking fancy castle behind me right here was actually the place of the opening ceremony for the 17th Winter Olympics, aka Winter Olympics in Lillehammer 1994. I feel like the 1994 Olympics in Lillehammer is something every Norwegian has a relationship to. I sadly didn't get to experience this event due to me being -6 years old at the time. So my interest for the subject didn't really pop up until I moved here to Lillehammer myself. The Winter Olympics in Lillehammer 1994 was probably the biggest production Norway has ever produced. It helped set Lillehammer on the map, and it was a giant folkfest from the early morning till the evening. But did you know that almost didn't happen? Stop. Now, before this video properly begins, I would just like to state that I got most of the information in this video from the 25-year anniversary retrospective videos that were posted on NRK, the Norwegian broadcasting channel. Over there, they go into way more detail about the matters I talk about in this video, with interviews with the people that actually were there 25 years ago. So if you're interested in learning more about what's talked about in this video, links will be in the description below. There were many trials and tribulations on the road to what at the time was called... There were many trials and tribulations on the road to what at the time was called...
the best Olympic Winter Games ever.
But how did we get here? Well, let's start at the beginning.
When is the beginning?
Shut up, Daniel! Winter Olympics in 1994 was actually not the first time Lillehammer had tried to get the Winter Olympics to their city. They actually attempted to do this for the Winter Olympics in 1992, but was beat out by Albertville in France. So people actually didn't think that Lillehammer would be able to get Olympics for 1994. Sweden didn't like that Norway was applying for the Winter Olympics, due to Norway already having had the Winter Olympics in 1952 in Oslo. And Sweden, well, they hadn't had any Winter Olympics up until that point. So, when it was to be decided in Seoul which country would get Winter Olympics in 1994, the favor was leaning towards Sweden. But then, in a very important breakfast with the IOC, also known as International Olympic Committee, the King of Sweden arrived 15 minutes late. This was, as you can tell, scandalous, and might have been one of the things that resulted in Lillehammer getting to host the Olympics in 1994. And it was on the day, 15th of October, 1988, that the president of the IOS, Juan Antonio Saramanch, stood on the podium and said,
The decision is Lillehammer.
Lillehammer har vunnet! Lillehammer tildelt de olympiske vinterleker 1994.
Now, the LOOC was founded, which stands for Lillehammer Olympic Organization Committee. But that organization committee needed a president. And that man would be chosen to be Gerhard Heiberg. And let me tell you, you're going to hear a lot about this man, because this man is a man with guts, a man I will look to when I need comfort in life. Let's all just take a moment and think about how blessed Gerhard Heiberg is. But now start the production problems. One of the cultural features in the Lillehammer opening ceremony was to include joik from the Norwegian native people, the Sami. But the problem was that the Norwegian church thought that Sami joik was a heathen tradition and should not be implemented into the ceremony. But it was, and thank God for that. One of the big problems during the preparation for the Winter Olympics in 1994 in Lillehammer is that the Norwegians had thought that it would be a nice idea to combine the Greek flame with a Norwegian flame, to then ignite a flame in Morgendalen and have that travel around Norway to meet the Greek flame in the ceremony. The Greeks didn't like this, so they said that they wouldn't give Norway the flame if they went through with this idea. This made our boy Gerhard Heiberg very, very mad, and he publicly said to the press that if the Greeks would not give Norway the flame, he would personally see to it that the Norwegian Navy would travel down to Greece and take the flame as the Norwegians wanted it to. This was later calmed down and the Morgendal flame would be extinguished before the opening ceremony. But this just goes to show how much guts this man Heiberg had. One of the biggest events during the opening ceremony for the Olympics in Lillehammer was that the torch carrying the Olympic flame would be carried by a person jumping on skis from the top and landing down here for it to be ignited. The problem with this was that during the preparations for this ceremony, Ole Gunnar Fidjestøl, the person who was meant to jump with this flame, had a big fall, got injured. So he couldn't do it. This made Samaranch, the president of IOC, very scared and said that we could not do this for the ceremony in case that the other person to stand in would also fall and injure himself. Again, Gerhard Heiberg, bless this man, said no, f it, we ball. And you know, it went perfect. The jump happened, it was great, and it will now be remembered in history forever. There were many problems leading up to the opening ceremony of the Olympics in 1994, but probably the biggest problem was when Juan Antonio Samaranch was made aware of that skier Vegard Ulvang and Gerhard Heiberg had openly stated to the press that they had negative emotions to Samaranch's political endeavors prior to his presidentship in the IOC. This made Samaranch very insulted and he got angry with the LOOC. And as a result, he threatened to cancel the Olympics in Norway that year. Both Gerhard and Vegard apologized extensively to the IOC president. And after many attempts of buttering him up, such as a dinner with the king and queen and many conversations with our prime minister Gro Harlem Brundtland, Samaranch finally said, "Okay, but if the opening ceremony doesn't hold up, you're done." Everything was riding on this. If the opening ceremony didn't go as planned and didn't stand up to the expectations of the IOC, there wouldn't be any Olympics in 1994. So it was really important that this was a good opening ceremony. And let me tell you, what an opening this was. You had gnomes standing in the Olympic circles over there for almost 1.5 hours. You had people going down the ski sled carrying violins. You had Sami yoiking. You had reindeer with sleds. You had horses with skis being dragged behind them. And you had sleds with horses. Let me tell you, just to picture this, if you look over there, there was a camera placed on that hill to film this specific spot. Like, if that's not a dedication to detail, I can't tell you what is. Best yet, they had a blimp in the sky. Do you know how many blimps there are today? 25 blimps. I bet there were more back then, but still, that's pretty impressive. You had women riding on horses, dressed like they were fairy tale princesses from a Norwegian fairy tale book. Thor Heyerdahl, probably the most famous Norwegian explorer at that time, behind Fridtjof Nansen and Aanonsen, was standing here and talking in very, very bad English about how cool it was that people wore hair.
Sportsmanship demonstrated by athletes from all over the world.
There was a 3-meter tall egg just bursting out from the ground in the middle here. How did they do that? Like, look at these clips. How did they do that? There were people running and walking on that thing for 1.5 hours, and people just start bursting out of the ground, and they get an egg out of the ground? How's there space for that? I don't understand. It was magic. And when the Prince of Norway finally lit the flame, I almost shed a tear. But now begs the question, did Samaranch think that this was a good enough opening ceremony to keep the Olympics in Norway that year? Well, let me put it like this. When Gerhard Heiberg and Samaranch walked away from the opening ceremony, they were greeted by the Spanish king, Juan Carlos, who allegedly, with tears in his eyes, congratulated Gerhard Heiberg on what he thought was the best opening ceremony he had ever seen. So, if His Excellency Juan Antonio Samaranch wasn't impressed by the giant egg bursting out of the ground, this was sure to be enough to convince him to keep the Olympics in Lillehammer. The Winter Olympics in Lillehammer 1994 helped set Norway and especially Lillehammer on the map. It was and still is a big part of winter sports history and is an event that is still talked about to this day. It wasn't just a sports event, it was a folkfest. People were all about wandering, having fun, looking at the games. It was an event for people, more than an event for sports. And I think a great part of this is that almost all of the facilities that were built for the Olympics are still in use for other events and inspiring future sports generations to come. Thank you so much for watching this. And I hope this will help the younger generation appreciate one of the most impressive and most joyful times in Norwegian history. Have you seen these little guys? Look at these little guys. Aren't they fun? What are they doing? I don't know. They're dancing.
Smash that like button. Click that bell. Don't forget to click below and subscribe to SSS Studios. Da kan du putte det på hver video.